shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
So as we move into message time today, there are 3 words that are going to tie things together. And those 3 words are unexpected, and authority, and mercy. Those are really the 3 linchpins of the gospel today. But before we move into the gospel, we're going to use those 3 words, unexpected, authority, and mercy, to do a little piece about for Memorial Day. It's a story that I uncovered this week as I was preparing for this day. It's a story that's set during the Civil War. It's 1862. It's December. It's not a very warm and friendly day, and the setting is Fredericksburg. There, the Union and the Confederate armies had met, and what would ensue would be a very brutal 4-day battle between the two. It was a day that the Union soldiers were taking heavy hits, and a lot of their soldiers had been scattered, wounded across the battlefield. And because the ammunition was still flying, nobody had been able to go out and administer any aid to them. That day, a Confederate officer by the name of Sergeant Richard Kirkland, a farm boy from South Carolina, he went to his commanding officer, and he said to his commanding officer, "I can't stand it anymore. For a day and a half, I have been listening to those men beg for water. May I please have your permission to go out onto the battlefield," it was still an active battlefield, "and administer aid, basic aid, to those men who are out there begging. And with anxiety, his commanding officer finally gave him permission. And he stepped out onto that battlefield. And he went to the first man, and he held the man against his breast, and he helped him drink water, and he refilled his canteen. He put his knapsack underneath his head. He covered him with his own cloak. And for the next hour and a half, no bullets flew. And Sergeant Kirkland delivered water to those Union soldiers across the battlefield. It's certainly an unexpected story, because that's not how war and battle tend to unfold. It's certainly a story of authority, because the first thing Kirkland did went to his commanding officer asking permission, asking from the authority the ability, the opportunity to go out onto that battlefield. But when he stepped onto that battlefield and all fighting ceased, another authority took over. God's authority, as Kirkland went about his mission of mercy. And as he spent that hour and a half giving water to the wounded, refilling their canteens, cries would go out, "Water, water, in God's name, please, water." And there were some soldiers that were so wounded, all they could do was to wave a hand, begging for his mercy. Unexpected authority and mercy. We can find them in our world, but today we also find them in our gospel. First of all, the unexpected. Roman soldiers were hated by the Jews. So first century audiences who would have heard this story would have immediately pushed back about this centurion. Rome was the occupying force, and a Roman soldier, the centurion, was the man who was enforcing the occupation. And yet, as unexpected as all that is, this seems to be a very unique man. He was a man who understood authority. He understood what it meant to be told what to do. He also understood what it meant to command, go, and the soldiers go, or come, and the soldiers go, come, or servants, and the servants would do what was asked of him or her. But this Roman centurion has heard of Jesus and somehow understands that that authority is utterly different. That something within Jesus is so authoritative that Jesus can simply speak a word and someone can be healed. That is a completely different sort of authority. It's also a story of mercy. Somehow, that Roman centurion was wired for mercy. When the Jewish elders go to plead his case, they say, he loves us. He built us our synagogue, and clearly has a soft spot for this slave in his household. Moreover, it's a story of God's grace and mercy that is poured out in the healing of the man. Now, there's one more layer of mercy that the church has taken from this story. In the Roman Catholic Mass, just prior to Eucharist, they use this very language. Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word, and I shall be healed. Asking for God's grace and mercy. So we have unexpected, and we have authority, and we have mercy, and we're going to return to that authority for just a moment. Because it's exactly the point that Paul is making in his very unhappy letter to the Galatians. He's saying to the Galatians, you are under the gospel, but you're not listening to that authority. You have wandered off. And the reality of it is so easy to wander off because there are so many voices that shout and cry and beckon us so many different directions. Which voice appeals to us? Which voice shouts the loudest? Which voice convicts us? And Paul says if it's any other voice than the gospel, if it's any other voice than the conviction of the cross, we need to come to Jesus meeting. This last week, I received a letter. And the letter said that somebody had just recently been in worship. And when they were in worship, they noticed that the flags are not in the front of our worship space, but in the back. And the request in the letter was, please help me understand why the flags are there. And ultimately, the answer is this. In our worship space, we have one authority. And the authority is the cross. The authority is one God who sent his Son. The authority is grace and mercy that is poured out through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. The authority gives us the privilege to cry out, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word, and I shall be healed. Amen.
Well, this light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And every day, every day, every day, every day, every day, I let my little light shine. Oh, Jesus gave me light, I'm gonna let it shine.